Welcome back, everyone. Before today's story begins, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll always know when a new story is released. Your support means more than you know. Every like, comment, and subscription helps this channel grow and allows us to keep sharing incredible stories with viewers around the world. And before we begin, tell me this, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Now, grab a comfortable seat, relax, and let's dive into today's unforgettable story. Funny thing about stealing a man's land, I said, watching the auctioneer raise his gavel. Sometimes the paperwork follows you home. Celeste Vandenberg heard me from across the street. Her face tightened beneath a pair of oversized sunglasses. One hand clutched the marble column beside her front door. The other pointed at me like I was the criminal. "You can't sell my house," she screamed. The July heat shimmered above the asphalt. Cicadas buzzed in the cottonwoods. A yellow court notice snapped against the iron gate of her three-story mansion, and the smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the exhaust of 40 idling cars. People had come from 3 counties to watch the Queen of Silver Mesa lose her castle. The auctioneer barely looked up. "Court-ordered foreclosure," he said. "All objections have been reviewed." Celeste's husband, Trevor, stood behind her in a wrinkled golf shirt, talking urgently into a phone that no one seemed willing to answer. 2 sheriff's deputies waited near the driveway. Their hands rested loosely on their belts, calm in the way men are calm when the argument ended hours ago inside a courtroom. I stayed beside my old Ford pickup. Dust covered the tires. A crack ran across the windshield. Hanging from my right hand was a tarnished brass key my great-grandfather had carried when he bought Ashford Farm in 1911. 5,200 acres. Wheat fields. Cattle pasture. 2 creeks. A weathered barn built from hand-cut pine. For generations of sweat pressed into the soil. 6 months earlier, Celeste had stood at my gate holding a forged deed and told me none of it belonged to me anymore. Now strangers were bidding on her breakfast room. 2,600,000, someone called. The auctioneer nodded. Celeste stumbled down the front steps. Her heels struck the stone like gunshots. "This is retaliation," she said. "He manipulated the bank. He manipulated the county. That man is taking everything from us." I looked at the brass address numbers above her door. 1187, Silvercrest Lane. The same address she had listed as personal collateral beneath $42 million in development loans. The same address printed on the guarantee she signed without reading because she believed my farm was already hers. I hadn't forged her signature. I hadn't threatened her family. I hadn't broken a single lock. Celeste had signed away her own home while celebrating the theft of mine. The gavel hovered above the auctioneer's podium. For 1 second, the entire street went quiet. No murmuring buyers. No camera shutters. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. Celeste stared at me across the lawn. I could still remember the perfume she wore the first day she came to Ashford Farm. Something floral and expensive that couldn't cover the smell of diesel from the bulldozers behind her. She had smiled as workers ripped out my north fence. "Ownership is paperwork, Mr. Ashford," she'd said. "The county recognizes us now. That's all that matters." I lifted the brass key just high enough for her to see it. "The county recognizes this sale," I told her. "That's all that matters." The gavel came down. "Sold." Celeste made a sound I'll never forget. Not a scream exactly. More like the air leaving something that had believed it could never break. But to understand how an HOA president ended up watching strangers by her home, you need to understand what she did to mine. It started 6 months earlier, with blue survey stakes crossing my wheat field, an excavator digging beside my family cemetery, and a 72-hour eviction notice nailed to the gate my great-grandfather built. Where are you watching from? And what would you do if someone sold 5,200 acres of your land while you were still standing on it? 6 months earlier, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Diesel. Wet clay. Freshly broken wheat. It rolled through the open windows of my Ford before I reached the north gate. I had been away for 3 weeks, sleeping in a plastic chair beside my mother's hospital bed in Billings, listening to machines breathe for her. I came home expecting silence, cattle, and the slow metallic creak of the windmill. Instead, I heard an excavator. Its bucket slammed into the earth with a deep, hollow boom. My foot hit the brake. The gate my great-grandfather built was hanging from one hinge. The chain had been cut clean through, its links scattered across the gravel like spent shell casings. Beyond it, blue survey stakes marched across my wheat field in perfect rows, each one marked with a future street number. Cedar Lane, Vandenberg Court, Silver Mesa Phase 4. I climbed out without shutting off the engine. The wheat brushed against my jeans as I crossed the field. Dust scratched the back of my throat. Somewhere behind the ridge, a bulldozer reversed with a steady electronic beep that felt too calm for what it was doing. Then I saw the excavator. It was digging 30 feet from the Ashford family cemetery. For generations rested behind that iron fence. My father, my grandparents, men and women who had survived drought, blizzards, bank failures, and 2 world wars without losing that land. Now a machine was carving a drainage trench beside their graves. "Shut it down," I shouted. The operator looked at me through the glass, but kept moving. A white Range Rover came rolling across the field, crushing wheat beneath polished tires. It stopped beside me, and Celeste Vandenberg stepped out wearing cream-colored slacks, mirrored sunglasses, and boots that had never seen honest mud. Her perfume reached me before her voice did. "Mr. Ashford," she said, almost smiling. "You're back earlier than expected." She held out a thick envelope. I didn't take it. "What are you doing on my land?" Her smile sharpened. "That language is no longer accurate." She removed a document and pressed it against my chest. The paper was warm from the sun. Across the top, in bold black letters, were the words "Notice to vacate." 72 hours. Below that was a recorded transfer claiming Ashford Farm had been sold through an HOA lien foreclosure for unpaid community assessments totaling $1.8 million. I read it twice, then a third time. "This farm isn't in your HOA." Celeste tilted her head as if correcting a child. "The county records disagree." I drove straight to the courthouse. The clerk behind the glass partition typed my parcel number, frowned, and turned the monitor toward me. Where my family trust had been listed for decades, the screen now showed one owner, Silver Mesa Development Authority. My name was gone. The clerk printed the transfer documents. Every page carried official stamps. Every signature looked clean. Every date lined up perfectly, almost perfectly. I stood beneath the fluorescent lights, hearing the soft grind of the printer and the blood pounding behind my ears. Then I saw the red notary seal on the final page. The transfer had been notarized on Easter Sunday. The county office had been closed. So had every licensed notary office within 80 miles. Celeste believed she had erased my family with a few signatures and a county stamp. But somebody had been careless. And careless paperwork leaves fingerprints. The theft of Ashford Farm didn't begin with bulldozers. It began with a 12-foot strip of gravel. 3 years earlier, Silver Mesa Estates had been nothing more than rooftops rising beyond my eastern fence. Beige houses, matching mailboxes, sprinklers hissing at 6 every morning. The kind of neighborhood where people paid extra to pretend the countryside had been built for their view. My access road ran along their boundary for half a mile before turning west toward the farmhouse. My family had used it since 1911. The county map marked it clearly as private agricultural access. Celeste called it inefficient. She came to my porch one October afternoon carrying a leather folder and 2 paper coffee cups. Wind pushed dry leaves across the boards. Somewhere in the barn, a loose chain tapped against steel. "I brought peace offerings," she said. I looked at the cups. One is pumpkin spice. That explains why neither belongs here. Her smile held, but only barely. She opened the folder and showed me a glossy rendering of stone pillars, landscape medians, and a security gate across my road. Silver Mesa wanted to turn it into a second entrance for emergency vehicles. "No," I said. She blinked. "It would increase regional safety. It would put 400 cars a day through my cattle route. The HOA would maintain it. It isn't yours to maintain." That should have ended the conversation. Instead, it started a campaign. 2 weeks later, a camera appeared on a utility pole near the road. Celeste claimed it monitored neighborhood traffic. The lens pointed directly at my gate. Then came a small metal sign. "Silver Mesa Resident Access Only." I removed it. The next morning, another one stood in its place, bolted into concrete. I cut it down with an angle grinder. Sparks flashed orange in the pre-dawn dark, and the smell of hot steel clung to my jacket through breakfast. Celeste sent me a violation notice for destruction of community property. I mailed it back with a copy of my deed. A month later, she installed a private security booth where my road met the county highway. The guard inside wore a gray uniform and carried a clipboard. The first time he stopped my cattle truck, sleet was hitting the windshield sideways. "Resident sticker?" he asked. "This is my road." He checked his list. "Your name isn't here." I stared at him through the open window while cold water ran down my neck. "My name is on the land under your booth." He made a phone call. 10 minutes later, Celeste arrived in her Range Rover and authorized me to pass as a temporary courtesy. That phrase stayed with me. Temporary courtesy. Within 6 months, the HOA was charging access fees, then maintenance assessments, then security surcharges. Every invoice came on thick paper with official language and a deadline printed in red. I refused every one. Celeste recorded each refusal as an unpaid obligation. At the time, I thought she was trying to annoy me into selling. I didn't understand what she was building. Every camera log created a record of HOA control. Every security stop suggested they managed access. Every invoice created a paper trail. Every unanswered letter became, in their version of events, proof that I had accepted their authority and simply refused to pay. She wasn't claiming the whole farm yet. She was manufacturing history one document at a time. My father used to say fences tell the truth because they stand where someone put them. Paper is different. Paper says whatever the person holding the pen needs it to say. And Celeste had been writing her version for 3 years before I realized I was already inside it. I still believed the truth would matter once I put it in front of the right person. That was my first mistake. I drove from the courthouse straight to the sheriff's office with the Easter Sunday transfer, my original deed, and 40 years of tax records stacked on the passenger seat. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. A ceiling fan clicked above the front desk. Sheriff Cole Fenwick studied the papers for less than 5 minutes. "This looks like a civil dispute," he said. "They forged a land transfer. The county recorded it. On a day the office was closed." His jaw shifted, but he slid the documents back. "Take it to a judge." So I hired the best property attorney I could afford. Martin Bell wore silver cuff links and spoke with the calm confidence of a man who billed by the breath. He promised an emergency injunction within 48 hours. I wired him $25,000 and watched construction lights burn across my fields that night. The hearing lasted 17 minutes. Celeste arrived with 4 attorneys, a development economist, and a stack of permits thick enough to stop a bullet. Their lead counsel argued that halting construction would cost the county hundreds of jobs and nearly $500,000 per day. My attorney raised the forged transfer. The judge barely looked at it. "The recorded owner is entitled to use the property until ownership is resolved," he said. His gavel struck once. Injunction denied. Outside the courtroom, Celeste adjusted one pearl earring and smiled at the cameras. "Progress can be uncomfortable," she said, "but responsible leadership requires courage." The local news ran her statement over footage of me standing beside my truck. They called me a disgruntled former owner. 2 days later, Silver Mesa security blocked the main gate to the farmhouse. Concrete barriers sat across the road. A guard stepped from the booth with one palm raised. "You are not authorized to enter. My clothes are in that house." He touched the radio on his shoulder. I drove through the ditch. By the time I reached the barn, 3 patrol vehicles were behind me. Red and blue lights flashed against the grain silos. Deputies ordered me onto the ground while workers watched from the field. The gravel cut through my shirt. A knee pressed between my shoulders. Celeste stood near the excavator, holding her phone upright. "Recording. You're trespassing on active construction property," Deputy Lane said as he tightened the cuffs. "I was born in that house. Tell it to the court." They put me in a holding cell that smelled of bleach, sweat, and old concrete. The fluorescent light never stopped humming. I sat on a steel bench and listened to a drunk snore behind the partition while my family's land changed outside without me. At 2:17 that afternoon, my phone vibrated with 3 messages. The bank had frozen the farm's operating account because I was no longer the recorded owner. The feed supplier had canceled delivery. The livestock insurer had suspended coverage. Celeste hadn't just taken the ground beneath my boots. She had cut every line keeping the farm alive. Martin Bell stopped returning my calls. Sheriff Fenwick said his hands were tied. The county clerk refused to discuss an active case. Every office sent me to another office until the circle closed around my throat. When they released me after dark, Rain had started falling. My truck sat beneath a parking lot light, streaked with mud from the ditch. On the windshield was another notice from Silver Mesa. Unauthorized entry. Fine, $5,000. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because that was the moment I finally understood. I had been trying to prove the farm belonged to me. Celeste had built an entire system that no longer cared whether it did. The dead man's name was Harold Muir. I found it beneath the red notary seal on the transfer document, typed in 12-point font like it meant nothing. It meant everything. Harold had notarized farm deeds, cattle leases, and water right agreements in our county for nearly 30 years. My father trusted him. I remembered his tobacco-stained fingers and the silver pen he kept clipped inside his shirt pocket. I also remembered attending his funeral. 8 months before Celeste claimed he witnessed the sale of Ashford Farm. I drove to Wade Holbrook's house the next morning. Wade had spent 36 years inside the county records office before retiring to a narrow farmhouse south of town. He opened the door wearing suspenders and holding a mug that smelled strong enough to strip paint. When I placed the transfer on his kitchen table, the spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. "Where did you get this?" "It took my farm." He lowered himself into a chair. "Harold couldn't have stamped it." "I know." "No," Wade said. "You don't understand. That seal was surrendered after his death." I signed the inventory. Rain ticked against the window. His refrigerator hummed behind us. Wade ran one finger over the red impression, then reached for a magnifying glass. The edge of the seal was too sharp. The letters were perfectly clean. A real stamp used for decades would have carried scratches, flattened curves, tiny scars from thousands of documents. This one looked new. Someone had manufactured a dead man's authority. We went to the county archive after closing. Wade still knew which basement door failed to latch in cold weather. The hallway below the courthouse smelled of wet paper, rust, and old stone. Fluorescent tubes flickered above rows of gray cabinets. He found the Ashford Family Agricultural Trust under records filed in 1986. The folder felt too thin. Inside were tax maps, trustee amendments, and my father's original signature. But the page restricting liens and involuntary transfers had been torn out. A jagged strip remained near the binding. "They removed the protection clause," I whispered. "They removed the county copy," Wade corrected. He pulled open a metal drawer and found an old indexing card. In the upper right corner was a second filing number. State Agricultural Land Repository. Large farm trusts were once recorded twice, one copy with the county and another with the state, to prevent local officials from quietly changing ownership. Celeste had erased one record. She had forgotten the other. By noon the next day, Nora Keene had obtained the certified state file. The missing page was intact. It stated that no HOA, private association, or municipal assessment could attach to Ashford Farm without the written approval of every active trustee. I was the only active trustee. I had approved nothing. Then Nora found the digital access log. Harold Muir's county account had been used at 2:13 in the morning, 3 weeks before the transfer was filed. The login opened my trust, deleted the ownership restriction, and uploaded a replacement deed. The account had been dead almost as long as Harold. I stared at the timestamp until the numbers blurred. This was no clerical error, no misunderstanding, no aggressive interpretation of HOA rules. Someone had entered the county system using a dead man's identity and rewritten my family out of its own land. Wade closed the file carefully. "Grant," he said, "this isn't a property dispute anymore." I looked at the forged seal beneath the basement light. For the first time since the bulldozers arrived, I felt the ground stop moving under me. Celeste had built her victory on paper. Now I had the fingerprints. The number that changed everything was $42 million. Nora found it buried inside a commercial financing packet filed under Vandenberg Development Group. The document was 600 pages thick, held together by black clips and the kind of legal language designed to make honest people stop reading. We didn't stop. Her office smelled of cold coffee and toner. Rain dragged silver lines down the windows while she spread contracts across the conference table. I sat opposite her, still wearing the same mud-stained boots I'd worn into the county archive. Celeste hadn't sold my farm just to expand Silver Mesa. She had used it as collateral. The development company had borrowed $42 million to build 1,400 homes, a private golf course, and a shopping center across the northern pasture. My family's land was the foundation beneath every dollar. Nora tapped one paragraph with a yellow pencil. The bank questioned the title. I leaned closer. 3 months before the foreclosure sale, the lender's attorneys had noticed that Ashford Farm was held by an agricultural trust. They demanded additional security in case the transfer was challenged. Celeste told them there was no risk. Then she convinced every member of the HOA board to sign a personal guarantee. Nora turned the page. 5 addresses stared back at me. Celeste's mansion on Silvercrest Lane. Trevor's Lake House near Whitefish. The HOA Treasurer's Colonial on Brookhaven Drive. 2 more homes belonging to board members who had approved the false assessments and voted for the private sale. They had pledged their own property to guarantee that mine belonged to them. I read the clause twice. If the Ashford title failed, the loan entered immediate default. The lender could seize every listed asset without waiting for the development company to collapse. Do they understand what they signed? I asked. Nora gave me a tired smile. They understood enough to take the money. She showed me the signature page. Celeste's name swept across the bottom in blue ink, large and confident. Beside it, she had written her home address by hand. The pen had pressed so hard it left an impression on the next 3 pages. I could almost see her signing it. Perfect nails. Expensive perfume. Trevor beside her. The board members nodding while she explained that guarantees were just routine banking language. Celeste never imagined anyone would prove the farm transfer fraudulent. She thought the only person who could challenge it was broke, arrested, and locked outside his own gate. That was when Nora showed me the lender's internal valuation. The bank had appraised my farm at $68 million. Silver Mesa had supposedly purchased all 5,200 acres for $1.8 million, the exact amount of the fake HOA debt. Even the numbers confessed. But Nora warned me not to move yet. If we exposed everything immediately, Celeste could blame the fraud on a clerk, fight the case for years, and shelter her assets. We needed her to confirm the guarantees after receiving notice that the title was disputed. We let her keep building? I asked. We let her keep signing. The rain struck the glass harder. For weeks, I had wanted bulldozers stopped, fences restored, and Celeste dragged into court. Now I understood that anger would only warn her. The strongest trap was already built. She had designed it herself, financed it with my land, and placed her own house at the bottom. I folded the page until her address disappeared inside the crease. Celeste believed she had taken my farm with paperwork. What she didn't know was that one of those papers already carried the legal key to her front door. 3 days after Nora found the guarantees, I walked into the Silver Mesa clubhouse carrying a surrender agreement. Celeste was waiting beneath a crystal chandelier with the entire HOA board seated behind her. The room smelled of lemon polish, catered salmon, and money people hadn't earned yet. Through the glass wall, I could see construction cranes turning above my northern pasture. I placed the agreement on the table. I'm done fighting, I said. Celeste's expression didn't change immediately. She was too practiced for that. But her fingers tightened around the gold pen in front of her. My proposal was simple. Silver Mesa would pay me $600,000, cover my mother's medical bills, and give me 30 days to remove personal belongings from the farmhouse. In return, I would withdraw every objection to the development. It was an insulting amount for 5,200 acres. That was why she believed it. Mr. Ashford, she said, I'm glad you've finally chosen reason over emotion. Behind her, Trevor leaned back and smiled. The board members exchanged relieved glances. They thought the broke farmer had come begging before winter finished him. I kept my face still. I wanted over. Celeste loved hearing those words. She announced a special board vote that evening, turning my defeat into a community celebration. Residents filled the clubhouse while waiters poured champagne beneath banners showing the future golf course and shopping center. Celeste stood at the podium. This proves, she said, that lawful development always defeats personal obstruction. Applause rolled through the room. I sat in the back beside Nora, listening to ice click inside glasses. Then the bank representative arrived. He carried one black folder. The final construction draw, another $11 million, required the board to reaffirm its personal guarantees because a title objection had appeared in the state filing system. Celeste glanced toward me. I lowered my eyes. Exactly as rehearsed. This objection is being withdrawn, she told him. Mr. Ashford has signed a settlement. Not yet, I thought. The bank representative opened the folder and pointed to 5 signature lines. Celeste signed first. Blue ink. Heavy pressure. Trevor signed next, followed by the treasurer and 2 board members. Each one confirmed that the Ashford title was valid and accepted personal liability if it failed. Nora's shoe touched mine beneath the table. The trap had closed. While Celeste posed for photographs, 3 things were happening beyond those polished walls. The State Land Repository was recording our formal notice of disputed title. Sheriff Fenwick was executing a warrant to preserve the county servers before anyone could erase Harold Muir's access logs. And Ashford Land Recovery, an agricultural holding company Nora had formed in my name, was purchasing the bank's most exposed portion of the development debt at 31 cents on the dollar. The lender wanted distance from a poisoned title. I wanted standing. By midnight, I wasn't just the man challenging Celeste's ownership. I was one of the creditors entitled to enforce the guarantees she had just signed. There was one more detail. Nora had separated the innocent homebuyers from the board's liability. Families who had placed deposits on houses would keep their claims. Construction workers would still be paid. The people Celeste had used as human shields would not lose everything because of her fraud. Only the architects of the theft remained exposed. Celeste crossed the room holding 2 champagne glasses and offered me one. "To new beginnings," she said. I took it but didn't drink. Behind her, the future development map covered an entire wall. Streets crossed my wheat fields. Luxury homes sat over cattle pasture. Her name appeared in gold beneath the words founding visionary. "You should enjoy tonight," I told her. She smiled. "Oh, I intend to." The champagne bubbles rose silently between us. Celeste believed I had surrendered my farm for $600,000. What she had actually done was sign her house to the man she had stolen it from. Celeste walked into court wearing white. Not cream, not ivory, white. The kind of suit meant to look innocent beneath television lights. Cameras clicked as she crossed the marble floor with Trevor and 4 attorneys behind her. Her perfume reached the gallery before she did. She never looked at me. She didn't need to. In her version of the story, I was already finished. Her attorney spoke first. He called me unstable, desperate, and financially motivated. He described Silver Mesa as a lawful community project threatened by a farmer who regretted selling after land values increased. Then he held up my surrender agreement. "Mr. Ashford accepted compensation," he said. "This case is nothing more than extortion dressed as nostalgia." Celeste smiled toward the reporters. Nora waited until the room became completely still. Then she placed Harold Muir's death certificate on the evidence screen. The date appeared 6 feet tall behind the judge. 8 months before the farm transfer. Celeste's smile disappeared. Nora showed the forged notary seal next. Then the state copy of the Ashford Family Agricultural Trust. Then the missing county page with its torn binding edge. One document after another. Each one landed harder than the last. The courtroom smelled of paper, old wood, and the sharp ozone heat from the projector. I could hear Trevor's thumbnail scraping against the table. Nora displayed the county access log. 2:13 a.m. Harold Muir's debt account had opened my trust, deleted its protection clause, and uploaded a replacement deed. The login originated from the private network inside Celeste's real estate office. Trevor leaned toward his attorney. Celeste did not move. Then Nora played the recording. Celeste's voice filled the courtroom. "Change the filing date. Nobody checks holidays, and Ashford won't understand the system until construction is too far along to stop." A sound moved through the gallery like wind through dry wheat. Sheriff Fenwick stood near the rear doors. This time, his hands were not tied. The judge removed his glasses. "Mrs. Vandenberg, did you authorize that alteration?" Celeste looked at me for the first time. I saw no apology in her face. Only disbelief that the man she had dismissed had survived long enough to bring her here. Her attorney objected. The judge overruled him. Nora presented the final document, the $42 million loan agreement, and the personal guarantees reaffirmed at the clubhouse. Celeste's blue signature filled the screen. So did her home address. The ruling took 11 minutes. The HOA foreclosure was fraudulent. The transfer was void from the beginning. All 5,200 acres returned immediately to the Ashford Family Agricultural Trust. The judge's gavel struck. That was the first sale undone. The second began before Celeste left the courtroom. The bank declared the development loan in default because its primary collateral had never legally belonged to Silver Mesa. As a secured creditor, Ashford Land Recovery filed to enforce the personal guarantees. Trevor stood so quickly his chair hit the floor. You planned this, he said. No, I answered. You signed it. Outside, deputies placed Celeste under investigation for fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and unauthorized access to county records. Reporters shouted questions as her white suit disappeared between uniforms. 3 weeks later, foreclosure notices appeared on 5 properties belonging to the board members who had approved the theft. 6 weeks after that, I stood across from Celeste's mansion holding my great-grandfather's brass key. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Celeste screamed that her home could not be sold. I looked at the yellow court notice snapping against her gate. The county recognizes this sale, I said. That's all that matters. The gavel fell. Sold. The first thing I did after winning the farm back was stop the bulldozers. Not next week. Not after the paperwork cleared. That afternoon, I drove through the north gate with Sheriff Fenwick behind me and the court order resting on the passenger seat. The air smelled of diesel, crushed wheat, and rain trapped beneath heavy clouds. Machines stood across the field with their engines running, steel buckets suspended above the ground. I raised one hand. The engines shut down one by one. The sudden silence felt enormous. For 6 months, Ashford Farm had grown beneath saws, trucks, drills, and men following orders they never questioned. Now I could hear meadowlarks near the creek. Wind moved through the wheat that remained. Somewhere beyond the barn, the old windmill turned with its familiar metallic creak. Celeste had planned 1,400 homes. 212 families had already placed deposits. Some had sold their previous houses. Some had moved children across state lines. None of them knew their future streets had been drawn across stolen land. I could have closed the gates. Legally, I could have canceled every agreement and forced them to chase Silver Mesa through bankruptcy court. Nora laid the options across my kitchen table while evening lights stretched over the floorboards. You owe them nothing, she said. She was right. But owing nothing and doing right are not always the same thing. Celeste had treated innocent people like camouflage. She believed I would have to destroy them to reach her. I refused to become the kind of man she claimed I was. We created new contracts for every legitimate buyer. Completed houses stayed with the families who had paid for them. Deposits on unfinished lots were returned from the sale of the board's properties. Construction workers received their final wages before the developers took a dollar. The golf course disappeared from the plans. So did Vandenberg Court. I kept the damaged northern section as a small residential community, separated from the working farm by a legally recorded boundary and managed by a voluntary neighborhood council. Their first rule was simple. No hidden meetings. No secret liens. No president with permanent power. Celeste and Trevor were charged with fraud, forgery, conspiracy, bank fraud, and unauthorized access to government records. 3 board members accepted plea agreements and testified. The county clerk who had sold them access to Harold Muir's account lost his pension and his freedom. Sheriff Fenwick came to see me after the indictments. He stood near the repaired gate, turning his hat in both hands. I should have listened the first day, he said. You should have looked. He nodded. There wasn't much else to say. By early fall, the blue survey stakes were gone. We pulled them from the earth one at a time, filling each narrow hole with seed. The drainage trench beside the family cemetery was closed. The iron fence was straightened. My father's headstone was cleaned of red construction dust. Wade returned the certified trust documents in a waterproof case. Nora brought the brass key. I used it to open the old gate at sunrise. The lock clicked. Cattle shifted in the pasture. Frost silvered the fence wire. Behind me, workers raised a new wooden sign made from boards salvaged from the demolished sales office. Ashford Farm. Private land since 1911. I cut Celeste's property transferred sign in half and bolted the pieces behind it, where no one could see them. But I knew they were there. A reminder that official-looking words are not the same as truth. I walked to the barn and pulled the rope beneath the old bronze bell. Its voice rolled over all 5,200 acres, across the creek, the wheat, the repaired graves, and the homes of people who had nearly become collateral damage. Celeste thought justice meant taking her house because she challenged me. She was wrong. Justice took her house because she signed it away while trying to steal mine.